Dundee United were the red-headed stepchild of Scottish football. They'd won nothing, they hadn't even appeared in a final. Then Jim McLean turned up and might have just made them the best non-old firm team Scottish football has ever seen.
Fleming is inside, that's pretty good at it!
Dundee United, or Dundee Hibernian until 1923, first got into the top flight of Scottish football 3 years after their name change and entire restructuring. Once they acquired the land that would become Tannadice for £2,830, they'd bounced between Divisions 1 and 2 in and amongst all them world wars that were taking place. They'd survive insolvency in 1934 and became famed for the odd cup upset, most notably a 4-3 win over Celtic in 1949. They'd act as second-tier furniture throughout the 40s and 50s thanks to the goals of garlic bread aficionado Peter McKay. But when Jerry Kerr was appointed manager at Tannadice in June 1959, he got them back into the top flight at the very first time of asking. Unlike previous management, money had become available to Kerr thanks to Taypools, a charitable organisation that would fetch about 10 grand annually for the club. They'd be competitive, inflicting the Dens Park massacre of '65 on their neighbours before beating Barcelona home and away the following year in their first European outing in the Fairs Cup. More on them later. They were more successful than they had ever been, more than holding their own in the top flight for more than a decade, when they had only ever previously been able to cope with 1 or 2 top flight seasons at a time. And that's where Jim McLean comes in. He knew the area well enough, having played close to 100 league games for Dundee, and appeared all set to make the promotion from coach to manager upon his return to Dens Park. The club, though, had other ideas. Dundee had famously won the title in '62, even reaching the European Cup semis the following year. With a trio of domestic cups to boot, they were comfortably the most successful team in the city. Not hard, when Dundee United hadn't even come close to reaching a final. And with United only over the road, of course, moving Jerry Kerr into a general manager role in 1971, the wheels were set in motion for change, not just in Dundonian football but in the entire Scottish game. They hired McLean from across the road to virtually zero fanfare. How was he supposed to live up to the Jerry Kerr days? He got to work immediately, signing 8 new players within 6 months and a further 9 on school book forms. This would be a facet of McLean's time at Tannadice: sign young, sign cheap and create a culture. In '73 it started to bear fruit. Graham Payne, Andy Gray and David Nary all making their club debuts aged just 17. This after maintaining a mid-table position without troubling the domestic cups too much. In short, McLean was matching Jerry Kerr's team. And in 1974 he did so in the Scottish Cup as well. But where Kerr's side had fallen at the semi-final hurdle against Rangers in '63 and Aberdeen in '67, McLean could go one better. Unstoppable at home through Airdronians, Morton and Dunfermline, Hearts were dispatched at Hampden. Dundee United would be appearing in their first ever final. Their opponents, the almighty Celtic that belonged to Jock Stein.
And Johnston. Kenny Dalglish, a great ball. Dixie Deans. Deans scores.
Whilst the trip back to Glasgow ended in defeat, it was not only a huge milestone in club history, but it confirmed Dundee United's place in Europe for the 1974-75 season. Unfortunately, the Tangerines hadn't quite enough experience to carry out what was a relatively continental approach from McLean, as they bowed out in the last 16 of the Cup Winners' Cup to Turkish outfit Bursaspor. With the restructuring on the horizon for the Scottish game, United knew they had to finish in the top 10 to be a founding member of the Premier Division, which they did, eloping to not only their best ever finish of 4th, but to a UEFA Cup spot. Once again, after a kind first round draw, they'd be found out in the second round to loftier opponents, this time FC Porto. And yet they found themselves marooned into a completely different battle come the end of the 75-76 campaign. Neighbours Dundee had roped them into a relegation scrap with their 2-1 win at Dens Park on April 21st. It left both Dundee clubs as well as Ayr United on 29 points, all fighting not to be in 9th place when the music stopped. United's loss at home to Rangers dunked them into the drop zone before 3 miraculous points from 2 games. First a win at home to Hibs and then an invaluable point at Ibrox saw United survive on goal difference. Even sweeter was the fact that their neighbours were the ones going down. Jim McLean wouldn't have to suffer such a potential embarrassment in the Tannadice dugout ever again. Dundee United shot out of the blocks in the 76-77 campaign, winning their first 5 league matches. After all, they kinda had to, after stumbling over the first hurdles of both domestic cup competitions. Soon the season would naturally give way to no victories between November 27th and February 7th, thanks to a combination of poor performances and horrendous weather which postponed more games than it allowed. Once the season was allowed to re-enter full flow, both United and McLean showed they had recoiled from the previous year's aberration.
Kennedy. Wallace taking the kick. Sturrock must score, and he does. Here he goes. Beautifully stuck away by McAlpin. Sturrock out in front to Wallace. Wallace scores, and it's 3-2.
That game just part of a 10-match unbeaten streak that had Dundee United on the precipice of a title challenge as Celtic's closest rivals. Ultimately, Celtic and Parkhead were next, and they would end the Arabs' undefeated run, spiralling the club into 4th place with just 1 win from their final 9 league games. Still, it meant Europe, in which McLean's side still had an almighty way to go, bouncing out against Copenhagen 3-1 on aggregate in the UEFA Cup first round. Still, they improved incrementally in every other way, reaching the latter stage of the both cup competitions back home, as well as recording a 3rd place finish in the league. This was a team built off the backs of young and cheap recruitment. Paul Hegarty, at a cost of £27,500 from Hamilton 4 years prior, represented a Tannadice splurge. In truth though, whenever McLean did break the bank to sign players, Tom McAdam and John Borg, who turned up for a combined 100k, they never did quite fit in. But this was a club that needed to take the leap to the next level, and that meant beating the old firm more regularly. In 7 years, McLean had stood toe-to-toe with the old firm on 38 separate occasions in league format and had won just 4, losing 27. 78-79 was different. In October, both old firm clubs met United and neither prevailed, Frank Coppell sinking Celtic. 2 months later, the same story, a win against one giant, a draw against the other. This time, it was Rangers' turn to fall to the Tangerines in a 3-0 rout. On Christmas Day, McLean's men sat top of the table, with Partick Thistle as their nearest rivals apparently. Then, with winter setting in, United's momentum stalled, losing both league games that they'd be able to get on between Christmas and the start of March. Ultimately, they'd finish 3rd again, only trailing the Celtic pace by 4 points, and whilst key defeats late on in the campaign to the old firm will resonate, it was just as much a trio of needless defeats to Morton, as well as at Love Street and Easter Road in the winter, that derailed United's title bid. But it was clear that the title bid had done the Arabs the world of good.
Duckwood is still down, but that's a good ball to Pettigrew. Still a chance. He scores. Fleming is inside, there's Pettigrew done it! He's on the clear! What he took off, and own goal!
A season that had apparently begun with the doom of a huge player departure in Ray Stewart at $400,000 to West Ham had reached its midpoint with the club's first ever trophy. McLean was relentless though. He already had his replacement in reserve by the name of 20-year-old Derek Stark, and still remained in the black when acquiring Motherwell frontman Willie Pettigrew and Chelsea's Eamon Bannon. And while United's other cup campaign didn't amount to much of anything, it's worth showing the first Dundee derby in the cup for 24 years nonetheless.
A Pettigrew clear to score from 15 yards, spotted by George Fleming, saw Graham Payne chipping the ball neatly into the Dundee goalmouth. It struck Dundee's Ian Redford, but Paul Stark was there to score. The goal was a real beauty. A corner kick by Payne was knocked out of the Dundee goalmouth, and fullback Frank Coppell moved in smartly to send Pettigrew clear. The striker turned by the time United's 4th goal came along. It saw Pettigrew controlling a strike cross to score. Box with his tackle, Pettigrew accepted the opportunity of getting his fourth.
Rangers would go on to eliminate United from the following round, but joke's on them. McLean's side would finish above the Gers for the first time in club history, despite a poor return of 37 points. It meant yet another campaign of UEFA Cup football, not that United knew how to manage it just yet, out at the second round stage for the second successive season. But Europe simply had to take a back seat because of what the Arabs were up to in the Cups back home.
There it is, a chance for Dodds. That's it, the opening goal, Davy Dodds. Now Payne with the corner kick. Heggery's headed off the bar. The ball's in the net. Paul Sturrock scores the second goal for United. There's Payne with the corner. Heggery's here again. That's it. Sturrock.
And he saved it. And gives Cooper with a chance. And is it going in? It's the goal.
The League Cup represented a closing of the gap to the Dundonian neighbours, and whilst the Scottish Cup final was lost, United had taken Rangers to a replay, and in both competitions they had dispatched of Celtic at the semi-final stage to reach Hampden. Jim McLean's Dundee United had officially arrived. His stock had risen that much that he'd be enveloped into Jock Stein's national team employ ahead of the 1982 World Cup. Understandably, amid the hubbub of the Cup's successes, United flaked out to 5th place, but it still meant UEFA Cup football, and this time they didn't do that badly.
People had a great night last night, and this time he puts it the other side 5-1.
End to arguably the best performance in Dundee United's history.
Cross towards Milne. And a perfect header to make it 4.
And after dispatching of Monaco and Gladbach, as well as running up a 2-goal lead over Serbians Radnički in the quarter-finals, it should have been only the start of something special, only for that advantage to be snuffed out late in the day in the return leg. The fact that United had come such a long way was amplified by the fact that the season, with its 4th place finish in the league, felt like a disappointment. They even had time to cram in another trip to Hampden as well.
That Redford, Ian Redford surely wins the cup for Rangers.
But now Hampden was starting to feel like a curse. Their 4th final in 3 seasons, and despite winning 2 trophies, United had claimed both their League Cups at Dens Park in replays. Somehow McLean would go his whole managerial career without lifting a trophy at Hampden. The 1982-83 season would continue that so close but so far mentality, as Celtic stopped United in the League Cup semis, St Mirren handed them their Scottish Cup elimination for the 4th time in 6 years, and the quarter-finals in the UEFA Cup proved the stumbling block once again, despite their beating of former UEFA Cup champions PSV as well as Werder Bremen. This time though they bowed out to Bohemians of Prague. All that was left was to break from the norm in the Premier Division to remedy the season.
Milne, start up. He gets round the keeper, there's a great chance. David Dodds makes it. Hammers it in, and Dodds tries to put it in, and has. Sturrock did that well. Stevens tried to draw him back. This must be, yes. 1-0.
They were beaten just the once before Christmas on November the 6th against Aberdeen, and together they would be calling themselves the new firm. In 3 encounters with the old firm, the Tangerines remained unpeeled, as they kept pace with league leaders Celtic by Hogmanay. A double-barrelled defeat to firms old and new in January ought to have knocked McLean's men off course, but instead they battled through.
Played in by Bannon. Headed again by Goff. It's 2-1 for United.
It's going a begging. That's the second one, Milne. Patterson, no good, surely. Yes, Sturrock.
Holding Celtic at home, they stuck another 5 beyond their neighbours before getting revenge over Aberdeen and defeating a lacklustre Rangers in advance of an enormous title showdown. Parkhead, April the 6th, and a win would take Dundee United to the top of the table with only 6 games to play. They held out for an hour, but Celtic proved too strong, winning 2-0, and that was supposed to be the end. The almighty Celtic with their 3-point lead, and even now Aberdeen viewed as more prominent title challengers thanks to their game in hand. Dundee United hadn't really been in a title race before they still had another trip to Parkhead to come and were now supposed to depart the scene until...
Ball in the wrist, on the Bannon wrist. Now it's Bannon against Thompson. 1-0 to United.
Oh, Sturrock, and that's it.
Bannon to take it. Lighting it in, off the post, and Dodds completes the task.
Deadly in its accuracy and execution.
And it is an absolute travesty that the game that changed the very fabric of the title race is lost to the sands of time. The match on April the 20th where United were down to 10 men, where they were clawed back twice by the league leaders before Ralph Milne scored the late winning goal, not just for the match but for potentially the title race as well. McLean labelled it probably the best performance away from home since I became manager. They went to within a point before 3 days later leapfrogging Celtic thanks to their disastrous defeat at Pittodrie. United simply had to keep winning, and they did, at Morton and at home to Motherwell as well as against Kilmarnock. It appeared the easiest thing in the world, 3-4-0s, no problem whatsoever. It left one match to go, enough finer place to seal their first ever championship. Dens Park on the final day against their neighbours, a win would make sure.
Inside McLean. Gone to the left. Absolutely unbelievable. Taken. Here's Bannon. He's taken the first time. And Bannon makes it on the rebound.
Dundee United were champions of Scotland, which in turn meant they were eligible to play in the European Cup. With hindsight attached and the fact that they would never be such an important cog in a title race machine again, it was to be their only chance at lifting the big-eared cup. Not that Dundee United's domestic form fell off a cliff, they remained unmoved in third position in the next 4 years as a transference of power from the new ways of Dundee United and 2 more Aberdonian titles returned back to their old methods. First in 1986 via Celtic in McLean's last real chance at forcing United's way into a title race when the championship was ripped from Hearts on the final day. And then with the arrival of Graham Souness and Walter Smith to Ibrox, United would be shit out of luck for the foreseeable in league competition. And of the cups, well, same old story really.
Good drifting ball, it's there on the target. Great run by Ferguson here, can he put it away out?
The 1984-85 campaign was cataclysmic in that United lost both domestic finals to old firm foes, whilst 2 years later the loss of the Scottish Cup after extra time to little old St Mirren was just downright annoying. Predictable anguish would follow in the same competition the following year against Celtic before one of the all-time classic finals saw McLean lose an 8th Hampden final in 1991 against Motherwell. It was a curse that Jim McLean just simply wasn't made to break. But there were other frontiers.
Dropped by Milne, and his shot was deflected into the net.
By Ralph Milne, 26 minutes gone, and that's 1-0.
Chance now for Stark.
Whisper it from the rooftops, or whatever people say. Dundee United were 90 minutes away from the European Cup final. As only the 7th Scottish team to appear in the European Cup, they were as close as possible to following in the footsteps of Jock Stein's Celtic. The first round meant a straightforward Maltese trip. The second round, what was now becoming a classic McLean 4-0 performance against a Standard Liège team who had appeared in a Cup Winners' Cup final the prior year. After the winter break, Rapid Vienna, a team who, like Dundee United, were destined for a European final in the mid-80s. They had to dig deep, restricting the Austrians to a 1-goal lead, returning home clutching onto the gift of an away goal via Derek Stark. Davy Dodds the hero as another astute European performance was achieved 2 weeks later in an away goals triumph. In a field that also contained Dynamo Bucharest and Liverpool, Dundee United received the middle of 3 evils in Roma. Roma, who had European honours in a very distant past, but not a great deal of experience outside of their 1960s Fairs Cup exploits. If anything, it was McLean's men who held more experience in Europe. Not that it would matter to names like Falcao, Bruno Conti and Tonino Cerezo, to name just a few, but they'd not been to Tannadice yet, had they?
Off.
Goff back in. Oh, chance for Bannon. Still not in, it's there. Davy Dart scores. They've looked by far the better side. Looking for a second goal. There it goes, it's a goal!
It's Lorenzo. That's a good ball, and that is given offside. Well, I wonder if our colleagues at Italian television will show us the replay of that on the flanks. And there is Conte. Oh, that's a goal! Beautifully put in. 1-0 by Maldera. And that's put away. 2-0. Just inside. This could be the end. Bartolome.
A second leg that for Dundonians was heartbreaking with a pinch of controversy, but for the rest of Europe would set the wheels in motion for the devastation of Heesel's stadium disaster in 13 months' time. To put it lightly, Roma fans did not get on with those of a British persuasion, first as Dundee United could attest to, then as Liverpool found out when they won the final in Rome a month later. From there, the Anglo-Italian sentiment had reached the point of no return ahead of Brussels in 1985. Dundee United and the European Cup would be just a fleeting flirtation, but the Tangerines were not done with Europe just yet.
Free kick played towards Richard Goff. Header down, a first time shot!
And another header. It's Elsner with the cross, Nielsen with a header, 3-2 on aggregate.
Corner was nodded down by Clark, and Ian Redford was on the spot to turn the ball home.
There's a cross, the keeper in trouble. A great chance, and it's a goal.
After all, they'd gone toe-to-toe with Manchester United, a team whose star player, Brian Robson, had cost more than the entire Dundee United team. Far from embarrassed, humiliated or even dejected, the Tangerines lost by the odd goal in 9 over 3 hours. And whilst the following campaign drew the same mode of elimination, a slender third-round defeat, this time after extra time, the level of opponent, Switzerland's Neuchâtel Xamax, was the true reason for the disappointment. That summer could have been the end of an era. Assistant manager Walter Smith was being groomed for a promotion until he was poached by Graham Souness at Rangers. Then Derek Stark's career was ended due to injury before Davy Dodds and Billy Kirkwood also departed. In Dave Bowman and Jim McLean, McLean found his replacement, but no replacement could be sourced for Richard Goff, who was sold to Spurs for $750,000. Despite all of that, the Arabs' subsequent UEFA Cup campaign, however, was improved. Stern opposition from Lens, Craiova and Split were beaten, and finally, United had returned to post-Christmas continental football, and there were a few reunions from the club's distant past.
Finding out now about the Tannadice roar. The goal! A complete freak! Exactly 5 minutes to half time.
Kevin Gallagher it was with the goal in front of their own fans before Dundee United limped to 3 domestic draws against the best and brightest that Scottish football had to offer. Alright, it was Clydebank, Dundee and Forfar Athletic, but still, McLean's side managed to pull something out from the back pocket against Barcelona. Dundee United remain the only team to have won both legs of a European tie multiple times against Barca. 4 times the pair have met competitively, and Dundee United have still got that hold over the Camp Nou club. Not that they've met since 1987. Next, another name from the Tangerines' history book in what was quickly becoming the ghost of European endeavours past.
There's Bannon, the chance again, there's Ferguson! And Dundee United have scored! All by himself, here's Redford waiting in the middle. There's Callaghan, now Redford, a great chance for United second. There's Redford, yes!
They weren't able to pummel the West Germans by 5 in front of their own fans this time, and with the second leg away from home, the borrowed time known as Dundee United's UEFA Cup campaign was supposed to be over. Then up stepped Ian Ferguson and Ian Redford with the away goals. If there was any argument about who the biggest football team from Dundee was, that had been ruined now. They had surpassed their neighbours by reaching a European final. Now they look to match the efforts of Celtic 67, Rangers 72 and Aberdeen 83, meeting them across 2 legs with the Swedes, IFK Gothenburg.
Anderson with it.
On Clark. And that's the goal which United were dreading.
Mixed in with the loss of the Scottish Cup final 4 days prior, 87 proved double devastation for the Dundonian club. It should go without saying that they never got so close again. Scottish football wouldn't have another representative in a European final until 2003. For more Scottish football videos, why not click on this little playlist here.